Hello and welcome to another edition of the Moving Iron Podcast. This podcast is proudly provided by Axon, helping dealers move more iron for almost 100 years. Find out more at axontire.com. Axon was started almost 100 years ago out of a passion for keeping agriculture moving. It's that same passion that drives them today. With a vision for a better experience for both farmer and dealer, they set out to create a better way to move more iron. When you partner with Axon, you get immediate access to a full range of products and solutions designed to meet the complex needs of today's grower. Axon carries all major brands and sizes of tires, wheels, and tracks. From custom colors and sizes to fully customized wheels, you can have the solution for virtually any problem today's farmer is trying to solve. To find more or become an Axon dealer, please visit axontire.com.
Moving iron in the 21st century. Hard-working people working hard for you and me. Moving iron, time and time again. Through the years you'll find us here. Moving iron.
Hello and welcome to Moving Iron Podcast Markets with Shawn Hackett. Shawn is with Hackett Financial out of Boca Raton, Florida. And this edition of the Moving Iron Podcast is proudly provided by Axon, helping dealers move more iron for almost 100 years. Find out more at axontire.com. Also, TractorZoom delivering insights. If you're looking for what's going on in the auction marketplace, looking to see what auction inventories are and what upcoming auctions look like, also being able to see trend lines develop, check out TractorZoom's Iron Comps, and you're going to get a good feel for what's going on out there. So if you're interested in that product, check that out. And at checkout, use Moving Iron, and you'll get yourself a discount. Shawn is nice enough to come on once a week to sit down and talk with me about what's going on in the commodity markets. And Shawn, since we talked last, we've had some pretty significant things happen. We've had a brutal cold spell come through, which you talked about months in advance about what was going on there. You also talked about kind of what we saw happening with the same situation coming up in the Black Sea region. So, wheat's a big deal right now. A lot of people have their eye on wheat just because of all of the potential that we see with winter kill that's going to be there. And, quite frankly, as cold as it got for as long as it got for as far south as it got cold, I can't imagine that there's not going to be some damage to wheat. So let's just start there and talk about what's going on in the wheat market.
Well, last Friday, it was widely believed, at least most of the high-profile weather forecasters predicted that we would have sufficient snowfall to protect winter wheat. That was the thinking on Friday. And I warned, we've been watching weather our whole life, and one of the things that we know for sure is absolutely the worst correlation is the ability to predict snowfall in terms of where and how much. No one can do it. No one can do it. So we warned that we wouldn't read too much into those forecasts, that, we thought there's a good chance that could come up short on Sunday, because Sunday was a snow event. It was going to snow and provide protective layer of insulation. That would be the day. And it came up short. So like the key state of Kansas, for example, 3/4 of the state received less than an inch of snow. And they were supposed to receive 3 to 5. And that meant that we were dealing with minus 15 to minus 25 across most of Kansas. That's the core winter wheat belt, including parts of western Oklahoma, another core winter wheat belt. And so that meant that winter kill was major event on Sunday night, and then of course an additional event on Monday night in the protective snow cover. Now the market reacted on Tuesday pretty solidly. And then, of course, it gave some of it back, and that's not unusual. When you're dealing with weather markets, there's a lot of short-term traders that come in, look at what's called scalp trade, come in and get out, and so wheat is notorious for doing these kinds of zigzags, but we don't believe that is anything to read into other than that's the way short-term trading is. But this is a major event. We believe the market will dig its heels in here now, and then looking over the horizon, next week it looks like Russia, southern Russia especially, where there's no snowfall on the ground, and it's pretty warm actually right now, is heading for a significant severe cold spat that we think could offer the second round of winter kill for the southern region of Russia. And remember, as of the 15th, those taxes, those export taxes are in place now. So all that wheat that was being shoved into the market ahead of that to try to beat the taxes is over. So, looks like to us, winter wheat continues to be a place where we're looking for upside price volatility here versus downside. And short-term trading is what it is, but, this is going to continue to mean upward price trajectory. And, we're calling for a hot, dry spring for both Russia and the U.S. And so we just think that's a place that we would be looking for leadership in the grain markets, is that KC winter wheat market right now.
Yeah, and then we have this other cold snap that's supposed to come back through the southern plains and kind of stretch across to the Atlantic Ocean. It's supposed to be very similar to what we saw this past week here. So even in some of those southern plain wheat growing areas, you could have another shot of this cold air come through.
It won't be as severe. It's not going to be as extreme. I mean, we're dealing with 150-year broken records. It's not going to be that cold, and it does look like there could be some snowfall attached to it. So we're not thinking that the market will view that in the same light as they looked at this one. We would think the Russian winter kills is going to be more of a market mover event. I mean, that looks really bad to us next week, Casey. I mean, like really, really bad. We're not thinking the second round. I mean, there could be what we call spotty winter kill, but probably not enough to move the market in a major way, at least on that event. We don't think.
Yep.
So,
right on. Okay, so let's jump over. Let's take a look at some energy markets right now. So, energy got a good place at the table here over the week because Texas, for as energy rich as that state is, there's been. Well, what's the best way to put this? Green energy showed up and failed. All right, so the windmills that they use to generate electricity in Texas, and we got them in Kansas, we got them in Nebraska, we got them all over the place. They shut those down because of ice and everything else that were on there. And anyone that's watched the news can realize that about 25% of Texas's energy comes from windmills that shut down. So they had this rolling blackout situation in the middle of pretty epic cold. So I guess, Shawn, as you take a look what's going on in the energy market, what you see with natural gas and those, what kind of effect do you see those playing on the commodity markets now that we've realized that, I'm not going to say that windmills are bad because, they've got a place, but I mean, I guess as you start taking a look at those things, as a natural gas or propane, those kind of things start to have more of a draw here, and we start looking at the propane and natural gas needs for drying down crops after harvest and getting those fuels to the areas they need to get to. Kind of what's your thought there, and how do you think that's going to interact with what's going on in the commodity marketplace?
Well, I'm not sure if it was last week or the week before we talked about natural gas and propane, right, and how we would really be looking to hedge our long-term needs heading into the next winter. This is we call this the great trailer. Like if you're watching a movie and you watch the trailer of the movie, right, before you watch the main show, this is a great trailer to the main show that's coming next winter, meaning it's not going to be long enough to have a long-term impact on things, but it sure was one heck of a precursor or a highlight of what next winter is going to look like when we have months of this kind of weather, meaning that 1 week and society is breaking down in some of these states because of the unreliability of alternative energy power, and apparently no one ever thought it would ever get cold again in Texas, and so they had no backup plan. They didn't have that 6 months of coal lying in a storage that they could switch on to the power during extreme times to keep the power going. Apparently no one ever thought that maybe they needed to have a backup just in case. I mean, they had to know that windmills won't run when it's that cold. They just won't run. I mean, they had to know that, you would think. So I guess what I'm getting at is that and if you look at the price of propane has been soaring on just 1 week of cold weather, just 1 week of
right,
cold weather. It's just telling you how fragile our energy system is, how fragile our electric grid. Even in Iowa, they're having rolling blackouts because so much of their power is coming from wind.
Had it in Kansas. We had it here in Scotts Bluff. We had the same deal.
You just have to wonder, how is it possible that you would never think you're going to ever have a cold snap again? I mean, the fact that we can't handle a 1 week cold spell like this, and it's really a scary thing. We've been talking about this for years, actually.
Yeah.
We're going down this path that we know not what we're doing, and that when the push comes to shove and we get a really severe winter, which is the winter that's coming up next. I mean, the humanitarian consequences, forget the price of natural gas and propane and energy and all that sort of thing, which is going to go through the roof, obviously. but the humanitarian consequences of, people freezing to death,
Right.
The elderly freezing to death. So for, one of the consequences, as an aside, so many of the dairy processors in Texas, because they lost power, and they couldn't run their processors, had to dump all this milk on the ground. Not that that's going to impact the price of milk because it's not going to last long enough. But what I'm getting, what if there's 2 months
Right.
that these milk processors can't produce milk? What does that mean to the dairy prices? I mean, it's the implications are so far and wide, Casey, and yet we have, we have the current administration, doing what they're doing to promote what they're doing. I just really worry that no one has really thought this through carefully. And next winter, I'm really, really worried that, we're going to see what we've just seen, but see it in a manner that is beyond belief. And our hope has always been nothing in the United States ever happens without a crisis. That's just, we're in a crisis society.
Right.
And even though this was bad, we don't believe this is enough of a crisis to effectuate major change. It'll come and go. It was short-term oriented. We'll say, well, that'll not happen again. But next year is going to be so severe and so long-lasting that we think that could be finally the catalyst for change and to change the narrative of how do we really go about providing secure power to our country. And, of course, it's the midterm elections next year in 22. And so that could be a really interesting discussion after that kind of a winter and after all the problems that have happened. I think it'll be very hard for the politicians to defend the end of fossil fuels forever. I think that'll be a harder position to defend going into midterm elections. So lots going on. We're not negative, but we're just stating what we've been stating for a while. But we do think next winter might be the catalyst for change, that the pendulum might swing to, okay, wind's okay, solar's okay, but you better have a backup plan to them. And that's the real key. Is it's okay to do that, but make sure you have coal lying in the background to turn on when you need it, because that's the only reliable power in this kind of weather is coal. And of course, if you happen to have a nuclear power plant, but you can't build those overnight, those are years in the making. But coal, you can do it right away. And that's really, to me, would be the strategy. If I'm thinking out loud as a governor of a state of Texas or as the president of the United States, if I'm really thinking out loud, I'm thinking, how do we get coal as a backup plan during times of intense need for heating demand? That's what I'd be thinking.
Yeah. I heard someone on the news the other day. I can't remember what channel I was watching. I don't remember who the person was either, but they said the answer to the rolling blackout situation in Texas was more windmills. If they had more windmills, then they'd be right away. I'm like, the windmills are the reason you're in the situation that you're in. So it made me laugh.
It's kind of like printing money and borrowing money, right? We've been doing this in our country for 40 years, and of course, in the long run, it doesn't really work.
Right.
All it does is create greater debts and greater inflation, but it doesn't really actually improve anyone's lot in life unless you happen to be part of that 0.5%.
Right.
But of course the solution is, well, we just need to print more and borrow more and it'll work this time.
Yeah.
That just seems to be how, and it's, by the way, it's global governments that are in this mode. Well, it didn't work, but it will work if we just double down on it.
Right.
And so what you're saying is, just double down on it because it'll work next time.
Blood on Black 23, and it'll work this time, I promise.
Sounds like a really reliable plan to me. Tell me, how do I sign up?
Yeah, no doubt about it. All right, so let's take a look at what's going on in some of these other marketplaces. You take a look see what's happening in corn. Corn has been, there's been a lot of clamoring there. China keeps buying a lot of corn from us, not just corn, but also ethanol too. And so you're seeing some moves in the corn market. It feels like we've hit a point of pretty major resistance in a lot of these markets, whether it's soybeans, corn, wheat, wherever it's at. They're waiting for that next shoe to drop to see what decision they're going to make, because we're seeing these intraday volatilities where, a couple days ago, from the overnights to the close, there was about a 45-cent swing in soybeans. There was about a 20-cent swing in corn. Just one way or the other. So seeing a lot of volatility, a lot of stuff that you've been talking about when we're looking at this. So we take a look at some of these major crops, and especially as we start heading into this the crop mix for the year. I mean, that's the biggest conversation I've heard anyone have right now. Is like, I don't know what I'm going to plant because everything seems like it's the safe bet. So I guess as you take a look at these commodity marketplaces and these big, huge volatile swings on the intraday and in the week of volatility and stuff that we look at, I mean, where's that resistance level at, and then what's it going to take to get over that hump that we see happening?
Remember,
right now?
when you're dealing with carryouts that are now in corn, in the low 1 billion carryout range, and you're dealing with soybean carryouts in the low 100 million carryout range, a small shift in your view of that is a dramatic shift in the price, because we're dealing with, so if you go from 3.3 billion to 3, who cares? It doesn't matter. But if you go from 1.3 to 1.1, it matters a great deal. So understand that the volatility is a function of that we're so tight that, just a little lift, move one way or the other, and it can have a difference of 50 cents each way. So that's going to be here to stay. I would think that if we're thinking through what we're looking at here, we're going to have a warm, dry spring, which means we're going to get out planting early. We're going to get planting done fast. And that typically would mean that the market's going to view that as a bearish start to the growing season. The USDA, I think, comes out today or tomorrow with their outlook, where they project trend line yields. They project what they think the acres are going to be. They come up with some Ouija board that determines what they think demand's going to be. And what they typically say is everything's going to be fine. Everything's going to be fine. Every year, everything's going to be fine. We have no worries. Everything's going to be fine.
Best year ever. Yeah.
Every year is the best year ever. Everything's going to be fine. And so, on the margin, that keeps people from getting more bullish. And then we get the planting intentions report at the end of March. Who knows what they're going to say? No one really knows it, but that's will come out. And so, South America's harvesting soybeans, and that harvest is going to pick up pace, and more of those supplies are going to be available. So, and of course, because second crop corn is being planted 30 days late, we're not going to reach pollination until April and May this year instead of March and April. So we're not really going to have a weather function for second crop corn until, let's say, late March, right? So we have this period where it's just Chinese demand really that can drive shifts in the marketplace right now. And I think everyone's comfortable that we kind of know what it is. We've kind of factored it in for now. And maybe there's a surprise, maybe there is, but I don't think that's enough. I think we need to get to either second crop corn, pollination April, May in Brazil, that could cause a catalyst for corn to break out of this 550 area that's been having a hard time going through. Or we just need to get into the drought cycle in the U.S. as we get into June, and we start looking at the weather maps and the drought maps and the Palmer drought index and the heat, and go, oh my, and the crop conditions, and go, oh my gosh, this is trouble. I think that's I'm thinking at this. I'm thinking April is probably a time, at least for corn, and certainly winter wheat, coming out of dormancy, hot, dry spring after some very difficult winter cold conditions, both here and Russia. It's really a time where we would expect markets to wake up again and maybe start to have reasons to take these markets to another level. In the meantime, we think it could be a lot of back and forth trading. Winter wheat can work higher. We think winter wheat can work higher, and maybe that can drag the corn market up a little, but that's not going to be enough to get corn over 6. You're going to need something for corn to move up, but winter wheat can go much higher. And we've been talking about maybe winter wheat having an outperformance here because of different drivers for winter wheat. But for corn and soybeans, we just think it's going to be a kind of back and forth trade, at least into mid-late March. That's what we think. So,
all right. So let's talk about the cattle market and hog market real quick. Hog market has been on a tear. They every day seems to be a new day for them. Same way we're starting to see some real movement in the cattle market too. Talk about those two marketplaces and what you see happening there.
Well, the market's all fired up that we're going to get food service back online and get all that demand for meat back online, and we're going to a grilling season, and so we're getting this seasonal demand. But at least for hogs, we would be very cautious. The Chinese imports of pork fell off a cliff in the month of January relative to last year. Now, they're still high, but relative to last year, they fell off dramatically. And it's been our working thesis that they're just going to buy a whole lot less from us this year. Now, but the one saving grace, at least for the first half of the year, is that cold storage of pork is at very, very low levels. So as the Chinese come off their exports, we are going to take that supply and build up our cold storage back up again. So that can keep the market elevated during a period that there's optimism that increased food service demand is going to come in. So we think prices can be okay and be well supported, let's say into April. But once we get the cold storage filled up, in pork cold storage back up, and the Chinese keep their exports down year over year, we worry about an oversupply kicking in the hog market into the summer and into the fall. So, we think there could be a great long-term cash selling opportunity for hog producers. Our smart money algorithm is starting to show some accelerated selling that could trigger an important sell signal here soon. So we've been actually gearing up our hog producers to get ready to make some cash sales and to get some long-term hedging in place. And we've been warning about that in our subscriber base report. So, and cattle, I would feel cattle's a little different. We don't really rely on the export market for cattle. We rely on the domestic market. So the cattle market can hold up better because we're not so reliant on selling all this, beef to the Chinese. But at the same time, supplies look pretty strong to us once we get past the springtime. And so once again, we think there could be a seasonal cash selling opportunity. The bigger picture here is that we're worried about high feed prices causing a lack of economics for the livestock producer, and it's going to force them into liquidating the herd later this year and putting extra supplies on the market. So that's why we think this spring could offer a really good cash selling opportunity ahead of that herd liquidation cycle later this year.
Yep. Well, good stuff, Shawn. There's plenty of stuff going on, a million things moving in a million different directions. We've been watching cotton here, and cotton's been on a surge. Really, like we've talked about last time we talked about cotton, it's the child labor laws that the EU and the U.S. marketplaces are trying to avoid. So China's kind of stuck out there, having to buy what we've got so they can produce what we want from them. You start looking at dairy milk, class 3. You start looking at where it's been hovering between 16.20, 16.50, kind of been bouncing around that area a little bit. Not an incredible high price by any means, but it's still in a profitable range for a lot of producers. So when you look at the cotton market and those kind of that dairy market and those kind of where they're at as far as kind of things are moving forward, what's your thoughts on those two?
The cotton market is just a once in a lifetime situation. We've never seen this forced buying like this, where they have to buy. They have to buy. They have to buy, and so it's just been driving the market higher. But it is going, and so what the market is saying is we want to get more acres. We want to get more cotton acres, and so we think once the market believes it has secured higher acres, because remember originally at the late last year, it was looking like cotton was going to give up a lot of acres, and now it's going to be gaining acres. So once it gets that, the market could probably have a healthy correction. Thinking that we're going to have much larger production next year. And we're not looking at Chinese exports being any larger. We just see them being what they have been. So larger production against similar exports means more excess. So the market would probably, and if we get off to a good start to the planting season, which we think we will, that'd be a reason for the cotton market to, let's say, top out in March. That's typically a month that the cotton market likes to top out for those reasons. So, we think we could still head up into the mid 90s here before we get there, the way it looks to us. And then after that, there could be a great opportunity for, mid 90s is an awfully good price for cotton. And then, we think there could be a good opportunity for cotton producers to make some cash sales and lock in an extremely profitable price for them. So in terms of dairy production is just going through the roof, record-setting production right now in the U.S. because of last year's the government purchases of cheese pumped up the class 3 price to 20 plus and made dairy producers very, very profitable. And so now, but now looks like the government is starting to back away. They're still buying, but they're backing away as production is surging. So the rubber is this: can food service demand picking up in the back half of the year pick up enough to take over the government's role and to handle all this extra production? We don't think it can. It's not because so we think that the dairy market is kind of on a gradual decline here. We don't see any way that the market can head higher unless the government just keeps purchasing through the rest of the year. Because if the government's purchasing and we get food service purchasing back on, then we can have enough demand to overcome this increased production. I don't know how to forecast what the government's going to do, Casey. I wish I could.
Me too.
Every time I send a text to President Biden, I don't get a response.
Yeah, you and me both.
But we're assuming they're going to take a lesser and lesser role. That may be right or may be wrong. So we would be on the defensive here. We'd be looking at any time the government comes in and guns the price higher, like they do periodically when they come in and buy. We would lose as an opportunity to sell every time we see that, because we think it's a law of diminishing returns over time. So be careful in the dairy market, because it's possible they could just completely walk away. And if that happens, there's no way that food service will pick up the slack given the production we're seeing. So,
well, you got Cory Booker going to be on the House, or the House Ag Committee. So, I mean, he's got his vast knowledge of ag and how that whole thing works together is going to be mind-blowing. So I'm jacked. It's going to work out great for everybody. So yeah. Good times. Good times ahead, I can tell you that.
Yeah, good times ahead and proactive planning.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, buddy. Well, hey, good stuff as usual, Shawn. Folks want to reach out to you and get more information about Hackett Financial, what you guys do there, and how you can help their operation. What's the best way to do it?
Hackett advisors.com is our website, HACKETT advisors.com. All kinds of information, sample reports that the people could take a look at to see if what we're doing might be of value to your listeners.
Right on. You kind of sound like my intro there, almost at the start there, bud.
You're turning viral with your slurred speech. I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, good stuff, Shawn. All right, Shawn. Well, I'm Casey Seymour with Moving Iron Podcast. Make sure you check me out on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. That's where you can find the latest editions of the Moving Iron Podcast, as well as the Moving Iron blog. Also, go to MovingIronLLC.com. That's where you're going to find all the information about anything that has to do with Moving Iron, the podcast, the blogs, also the Moving Iron Summit coming up September 15th through the 17th. Shawn's going to be there. He's going to give a talk about what we see happening in the coming year. And Shawn and I did do if you haven't listened to it yet, a two-part series with Dr. Valentina Zarkova about solar activity and what we see happening here at the Grand Solar Minimum. So if you haven't had a chance to check that out, go to my YouTube channel, Moving Iron Podcast YouTube channel. You can watch the video there, or just anywhere you find podcasts, parts 1 and 2. So, Shawn, that was a great conversation we had with Dr. Valentina Zarkova. I learned a lot, more than I knew. And what was your takeaway from that series?
Yeah, I mean, it's nothing like hearing somebody who's that trained and that smart, and actually has done studies and understands the work. I mean, I know how to look at the work and take the data and use it to come up with conclusions, but she actually does the work. I mean, she actually understands these fancy equations and this high differential equations. And I mean, it was just, I learned so much more than I knew before, just seeing it through her eyes, that I really think anyone that has any interest in looking how these factors have impacted the weather long term that she has done studies on, it's just fascinating. It also gives you an insight of what might be, what might be ahead looking forward. And so it's just a great learning curve especially for someone. And I think that it was done in a way that even someone who knows nothing about the topic can follow enough that they can get a lot out of it. Like, we tried to keep it to a level that is still understandable by those that want to learn.
Yep.
So,
yep. I watched it. I didn't, and I'm no scientist by anyone's stretch of anyone's imagination. So, and I walked away understanding what was going on. So there's a great thing there. If what she's talking about happens, and if what Shawn has been talking about what happens, what we've seen here, this one little burst of cold air is merely the smallest molecule of the tip of the iceberg of what's coming our way. So definitely go out and watch that, listen to that, and take that information in. You're going to learn something, and it might help you understand what we see coming down the way here. So with that, I am Casey Seymour with Shawn Hackett. Let's move some iron, folks. Out. You want to have a meaningful competitive advantage to help sell more equipment. Whether you represent the sales, parts, or management department of an implement dealership, there's a surprising amount of complexity when it comes to tire, wheel, and track technology. Let Axon worry about that so you can get back to supporting your customers. Axon has leveraged years of experience to create a streamlined process that gives you a proven path to help today's grower and sell more equipment. The roots of their organization go back almost 100 years to the invention of the rubber tractor tire. Supporting agriculture is the number one driver of Axon, from product development through sales and service. To find more or become an Axon dealer, head over to axontire.com.
Moving higher in the 21st century. Hard-working people working hard for you and me. Moving higher, time and time again. Through the years you'll find us here. Moving